Welcome back to another episode of Particle Word for Word. I'm Morgan Knoxley. When you think of a scientist, who comes to mind? Maybe it's someone in a crisp white lab coat, a pair of safety goggles, holding a beaker full of bubbling green liquid, or scribbling complicated equations on a chalkboard. But now, be honest, was that person a man? Most of us have that default image burned into our minds. It's not that we were told science was only for men. It's that growing up, most of the scientists we saw on TV, in textbooks, and in the news were men. And the few women who were there, they were usually the exception, not the rule. This image, this story we've inherited, has a powerful effect. It shapes how we see science, how we see success, and most importantly, how we see ourselves. Because if you can't see anyone who looks like you doing the thing you dream of doing, it's pretty easy to start thinking maybe you're not meant to. That's exactly what this article explores. Titled "Where Have All the Women STEM Role Models Gone?" dives deep into the history and the heartbreak behind why so many women in science have been forgotten, overlooked, or pushed aside. It doesn't just talk about the numbers, though the numbers do matter. It talks about stories, the ones we tell, and the ones we don't. Because representation isn't just about who's in the room. It's about who gets remembered. It's about who gets quoted in the press, celebrated in museums, taught in classrooms. And when women in STEM are left out of those spaces, it sends a subtle but strong message that their work matters less, that their achievements were accidental, that they didn't really belong there in the first place. But of course, they did belong, and they still do. Women have been making incredible contributions to science, technology, engineering and maths for centuries. Yet somehow we keep losing their names. Their stories slip between the cracks. How many people know Rosalind Franklin discovered the structure of DNA? Or that Hedy Lamarr, yes, the film actress, helped invent the tech behind Wi-Fi? The examples are endless, and yet, still, most people can name more male scientists than female ones. And that has real consequences. When young girls can't name role models in STEM, they're less likely to imagine a future in those fields. They're more likely to see themselves as outsiders, more likely to drop out, more likely to give up. Not because they aren't smart enough, not because they aren't capable, but because we've failed to show them what's possible. So what can we do? That's where this piece shines. It doesn't just diagnose the problem, it offers a path forward, a way to tell a better story, a fuller story, one that makes space for all the women who've been doing the work, quietly, brilliantly, all along. And if we can change the story, we can change the future. Here's Where Have All the Women STEM Role Models Gone? Written by Kerry Duncan and read by Kat Williams.
Where have all the women STEM role models gone? The achievements of women scientists are non-existent in the Australian high school curriculum. When it comes to celebrating the achievements of scientists, there is a clear gender bias in Australian secondary classrooms. A recent study led by Dr. Kat Ross, an astrophysicist at Curtin University, compared male and female representation in Year 11 and 12 biology, chemistry, physics, and environmental science studies. Of the 145 scientists mentioned within the syllabuses, only one was female. Doing it for themselves, Kat was inspired to conduct the study while training physics teachers in an upcoming New South Wales syllabus. A colleague pointed out that in the radioactivity section, Marie Curie wasn't mentioned, says Kat. That alone shocked me. I figured, if Marie Curie isn't mentioned, who else is missing? I looked at the rest of the syllabus and saw no women mentioned. Kat realised this gender bias likely wasn't limited to the physics curriculum in New South Wales. STEM gender equity. Women make up 37% of enrolments in Australian university STEM courses in 2022, and only 15% of STEM qualified jobs were held by women. While female participation in Year 12 STEM subjects increased from 45% to 47% between 2013 and 2021, the gender bias within the curriculum is of concern. According to Kat, the senior years of high school can be a critical time for students making their career decisions. Students may feel less inclined to pursue careers in maths, science, technology, and engineering without visible role models. We're essentially telling them, if you're a woman and you're interested in science, your career doesn't go beyond high school, says Kat. So, how do we tackle the problem of underrepresentation contributing to low engagement of women in scientific fields? Representation matters. Relatable role models have major positive influences on young people across a variety of settings. People who can't find role models can't relate to people like them, have increased levels of imposter syndrome and lower levels of self-efficacy, says Kat. The lack of relatable models also has really damaging effects on the self-confidence of young people. What we need is to have role models that students relate to. They have to be authentic. We need multiple examples of role models at multiple stages of their career and education. Little Women. According to Kat, a combination of factors contribute to the lack of female representation in Australian science subjects. I think it wasn't an active or intentional thing, but more because people just weren't aware, says Kat. They weren't making a conscious effort to include women. But beyond that, it's a cultural and systematic bias against women and this undervaluing of the work that women do. Historically, male scientists have been credited for major discoveries. Methods or theories are named after a solo male figure, despite the work usually involving a large team. We're fed this narrative of a lone male genius making these isolated discoveries by themselves, says Kat. That's not how science is done. Fighting to #IncludeHer. Kat and a team of volunteers run the not-for-profit #IncludeHer campaign. They work closely with curriculum developers, starting with the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority, to implement changes to science education. We're trying to get them to develop a science curriculum that's far more inclusive and representative of what science is like in Australia, says Kat. We're hoping to work with other developers, including here in WA. We're also working with teachers to adapt their current lesson plans to include a broader representation of scientists. Lack of diversity. It's not just women who are underrepresented in Aussie classrooms. Minority groups are too. People who are culturally and linguistically diverse, gender diverse, or have a disability are rarely mentioned. The study found 75.9% of named scientists were European. There's not a single mention of an Australian scientist in the entire curriculum, says Kat. Here, in WA, we've had and continue to have some incredibly amazing scientists. We should be highlighting and celebrating that, but it's not reflected in the curriculum. Note from the editor. In this article, we have used binary notions of gender and gender identity, male and female, in line with how the main scientific study was written. However, Particle recognises and acknowledges diverse gender identities and the importance of inclusive language. As noted by Dr. Kat Ross in her research paper, the invisibility of gender and culturally diverse scientists is an important problem that should be explored further in future research.
Let's sit with that for a moment, because it's a lot, isn't it? This article reminds us that the stories we tell and the ones we forget shape everything. They shape who walks into a science classroom feeling like they belong. They shape who applies for that research grant, who speaks on the panel, who gets quoted, who gets remembered. And right now, too many women are missing from that picture. Not because they weren't brilliant, not because they didn't contribute, but because we didn't look closely enough, or we didn't think to look at all. But that can change, and it is changing, slowly, steadily, in classrooms, labs, and boardrooms around the world. We're starting to see more women rise to leadership in STEM. More documentaries, exhibitions, and media pieces are spotlighting forgotten figures. More teachers are consciously including diverse role models in the curriculum. And maybe most importantly, more girls are beginning to see themselves in the story, not just as helpers or assistants or exceptions, but as scientists, inventors, engineers, leaders. But we've still got a way to go. We have to keep telling these stories, louder, longer, with more care. We need to ask, whose names are missing? Whose work are we building on, without even knowing it? And who might change the world tomorrow, if only they knew they could? Because here's the truth, science isn't neutral, it's shaped by the people in it. And when we open the door wider, when we invite more voices in, science gets better, smarter, more compassionate, more human. So let's keep asking questions. Let's keep challenging assumptions. Let's keep pushing for a world where every young person, no matter their gender, can look to the future and say, yeah, I can do that. For more science stories like this, visit Particle WA at particle.scitech.org.au.